Hello all, it's John again, the old geek, and it's time to wrap up the G series. Today I'll be reviewing G3, Hall of the Fire Giant King. As with G1 and G2, I only have physical copies of the G123 reissue and the GDQ 1-7 super module. But with those, I had PDFs of the original releases to compare. With G3 I do not. So this review will be based entirely on the physical copies I do have, focusing on the Against the Giants version, as that is the one I've used at the table. I will also be giving a quick overview of the entire G123 compilation at the end of this review. For more background about this module's release history, check out my review of G1. Presentation to begin with, and I've googled the images for the monochrome release cover artwork, and I don't like it. Yes, the red fits the fiery theme, but after the excellent G2 cover, this one is a regression to the shoddy levels of the original G1 cover. As for the G123 compilation release, Bill Willingham's cover is a little better and rather dramatic, but I was never really a fan of his style. The giants don't resemble how I picture them in the slightest, and I don't want to see the fighters bum crack. G3 is a bigger and beefier module than both G1 and G2, taking up roughly half of the pages in the 32-page booklet of the re-release. Artwork is okay, certainly better than in the 1978 G2 release. Again though, I don't know what the artwork was like in the 1978 version of G3, as they had changed some in the other two modules. Text is a vast improvement on G2 in my opinion. There's a lot more in the way of description. Maps are consistent with the rest of the series, being bold and clear, and I believe there was no need to ever deviate from this general style because it worked. There are going to be some spoilers ahead, so if you want to avoid them and just get my overall verdict on this module and of the series as a whole, then skip forward. I'll work out the time to skip to and post it below. At the end of G2, the party either found a map showing the location of the Fire Giants Hall, or they activated a transporter that plops them right in front of it. If you're playing a campaign, use the map, because, you know, healing, XP, loot, gaining levels might be useful for the party. The King of the Fire Giants is Snur, and his abode lies in yet another mountain range, this time the Hell Furnaces. I love that name. So once again, the party need to go into a giant lair, find out what is going on and deal with it, same as in G1 and in G2, except something isn't the same here, because this time it's not the giants who are in charge. There's something altogether more sinister pulling the strings. More of that later. Everything about this adventure is bigger than in the previous two. It's the Texas of the series. I've never been to America. I just thought I'd throw in a US reference for you lot, parroting what I've heard. The halls are split over 3 levels and are satisfyingly substantial, with 20-foot wide corridors, high ceilings, robust pillars and great double doors making up the upper 2 levels, and twisty caverns being the deepest level. G2 was a tough adventure, but G3 takes that to another level entirely. Typically, the uppermost level of any dungeon tends to be more straightforward than any of the lower levels. They get more difficult as they go down. Oh no. Oh no, oh no, no, no. Fire Giants are stronger, more intelligent and more importantly organised. Their pets are tougher, their allies are tougher, their womenfolk are tougher, and there's only one way into the lair, which leads directly to their chieftain's throne room. It's a great way to subvert a norm though, meet the boss man immediately. This is also a very clever way of saying to the players that there is much more going on here than they might initially expect. My party ended up running away from the entrance section of this module a total of 3 times. and it wasn't until the fourth attempt that they managed to get in and stay in, with a nice use of hallucinatory terrain and transmute rock to mud. Some clever spellcasting. In a sense, this opening encounter design, with everything being sort of congested at the start, is similar to that opening section in the Forgotten Temple of Tharisdun, with show-stopping combat introducing the module and the exploration following afterwards. I like this style. It kicks off an adventure with a bang. Plus there's more of the insane ancient temple vibe here too, with the Temple of the Eye on level 2. It's Tharisdun. Definitely Tharisdun. You won't persuade me any differently on that one. So what exactly is that evil force that is pushing the giants forward, rousing the hill giant rabble, stirring the blood in the frost giant veins, and driving the fire giant war machine? Drow. Drow. Rhymes with cow. Mention the Drow nowadays and people will roll their eyes. But back in 1978, these were a new foe. Intensely evil, products of the most sordid of underground societies, lorded over by their spider queen, powerful, intelligent, devious, untrustworthy. In the mid-1980s, the Drow would become a playable race, and authors began to put them everywhere. They became normal. They lost their punch. They became redeemable. Just another elven race. And nowadays you'll be lambasted for even hinting that you liked them as they were, because, you know, politics. The Drow of this module series and of the following D series were awesome. The greatest villainous race in the history of D&D. There, I've said it. They were a villainous race. They were nasty to the core. Make them irredeemable. Proper villains. Yes, do it that way. G3 only really dropped small morsels about the Drow, their motives and their machinations. They would be expanded upon in the D series, especially D3, the Vault of the Drow. But it was enough. Their mere stats, their choice of weapons, their names, and hints to their allegiances. And tentacles. What Call of Cthulhu fan does not like tentacles? One interesting facet of the Drow in this series is that the faction behind the giants do not appear to be entirely loyal to Lolth. There's a rival faction in the caves, and I would have loved it if Gygax had furnished this competition with a bit more detail, because it's all just really implied. Yes, the various houses and their desires get a bit more detail in D3, but a bit of background here in G3 would have helped with continuity of the series. The Drow initially inhabit some of level 2 of this adventure, and a portion of level 3. But when I ran it, I had them moving around a lot, especially once they had become aware of the party within the giants' quarters. This did make for some extensive bookkeeping, as they are not the simplest of creatures for a DM to run, with an array of spells and innate powers, but it all seemed to work and give the environment a sense of life. So, back to my own party. They eventually wore the giants' forces down and got rid of the threat of the Drow with a clever use of the gate spell, as the party magic user had been lucky enough to find a copy of one in an earlier adventure. They just got the one copy, so it had to work this one time. So they set about clearing out level 3, the cave level. And they got careless. Before you try to force a red dragon to give up its treasure, make sure you have plenty of resistance to fire, and more than about 30 or 40% of your total hit points. Thus, this module pretty much ended our campaign in that moment of rashness. I never got to run D1, D2 or D3, and for that reason alone I hate G3. Only joking. Sure, we'd already had a number of deaths. A character was lost alone in the Underdark. Another one had already been raised twice in this adventure alone. But this one error of judgment sealed it. Okay, it wasn't their only error of judgment. They had already trusted the dwarven advisor when he'd flirted with the female dwarf character in the party. But to be fair to my players, they'd done pretty well up until then, as this is one of the toughest modules ever put to print. That bottleneck at the start, the lethality of the enemies, especially the Drow, backed up by some nasty traps. The Drow also served to give it depth, with the potential for allies of sorts, infighting and politicking. The rewards for a clever and lucky party are immense, but there is the potential for them to be wiped out at nearly every turn. As a finale to this series, G3, the Hall of the Fire Giant King, is an absolute monster of a module. It takes the challenge up to another level entirely. It is hard work for the DM too. Prep time for me was extensive and occasionally laborious, as this was still the age when modules only listed enemy hit points for most creatures. It's pretty much only the Drow that have got anything more than the hit points listed. Area descriptions, while better than in G2, are quite dense in places, and I had to draw out charts showing all the monster locations and total forces remaining, and that took ages. But with all that effort came great reward. Okay, I suppose it is time for a rating. It's a brutal hackfest at times, certainly early on, but it develops nicely as the party delve deeper into an imaginative and occasionally creepy dungeon crawl. The Drow bring a layer of extra challenge, and their presence gives the party options, thus lifting it above the shorter, simpler G2. But I still think G1 is the best adventure in this series. Thus I give G3 8.5 out of 10. Now then, my original copy was G123 with the green cover. Same as this one, only this is one I picked up from eBay for about 10 quid about 4 or 5 years ago. It's a 32-page booklet, 2 outer cardboard sleeves with the maps on them, and revised and largely improved artwork over the individual G1, G2, G3 releases. I do remember seeing those individual monochrome modules in my local Games Workshop for about £4 or £5 each. I can't remember exactly, I think they were a fiver. But this compilation, when I bought it brand new in about 1984, all 3 modules, £6. It's a no-brainer. 3 meaty adventures, maybe 100 hours of total gameplay for £6. That's all it cost back then. So if I'm to rate the original compilation, well, this compilation is 1981 compilation, I've got to give it 10 out of 10. Simple as that. Has a module ever offered better value for money? Well, thank you all for watching once again. Sorry, I won't be reviewing the D series or Q1. I can't. I've not run them. Blame the Red Dragon for that. See ya.